Brad, did I ever tell you that I was once accosted by a mountain goat?
By a mountain goat?
By a Southwest American mountain goat. I'm hiking down the Grand Canyon, which, as you know, is you're basically hiking down a cliff face, back and forth, switch faces all the way down. And I'm about, I don't know, a quarter mile down the Grand Canyon, and all of a sudden, there is probably a 300-pound, 400-pound mountain goat just standing right in our way. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever seen what they're able to do. They can walk like vertically along a cliff face, and they need like 1 inch, to have their little paws or whatever it is. So not paws.
Hooves.
They have their little
I believe they're called hooves. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? Anyway, and so like. But we're like, okay, we can't go back because that's going back up the Grand Canyon. We can't go forward. Yeah. So it literally became two adults, because it's my friend Dave and I, two adults just sitting. Because it's been like 15 minutes. We just end up sitting on the path waiting for the goat to get out of the way, because there's no way in hell, Brad, that I'm going up with like wavy arms to a goat.
Right.
That could easily launch me into the Grand Canyon. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get this thing.
Yeah.
So we're just sitting there waiting like dopes on a goat to decide, like, I'm done eating this one bit of grass. I'm going to go on to the next bit of grass. Finally, he goes. We hike down to the Grand Canyon, and then, Brad, the coup de grace. 23-year-old me realized I didn't bring enough water, and we have to hike back up the Grand Canyon.
Oh, no.
And apparently this is such a common thing that the Park Service has run a pipe of water down the side of the cliff face so that when you get to the bottom, it's like, hey, idiot, did you not bring enough water on the way down? Guess what? We got you covered. Fill up your water here, you dumb dummy. The goat should have thrown you off the cliff face.
Didn't you? I mean, so that was going to be my solution. Like, if you would have thrown him some food. But if you didn't have water, you probably didn't have trail mix or anything on you.
I cannot tell you how massively unprepared I was for hiking down the Grand Canyon. Because my friend Dave and I, so this is more story than you wanted, but he inherited a car, which in your 20s is a big deal, but it was in North Carolina. We had to fly out to North Carolina to get it. He's like, you want to drive across country with me? And I was like, I sure do.
Yes.
And so we flew out North Carolina. We drove a Ford Taurus. For those of you in foreign climes, that's one of the highest watermarks of American automobiles. Nothing exceeds a Ford Taurus. And we drove a Ford Taurus across country. Anyway, we get to the Grand Canyon, and Dave goes, you want to hike the Grand Canyon? I go, sure do. I had like, 3-year-old tennis shoes. I had a T-shirt wrapped around my head. I had not enough water. I had no food.
Oh my God, you're like...
Thank God I was in good shape in my 20s, because I would have been murdered.
Oh my God, the T-shirt wrapped around your head is immediately you brought up Clark Griswold hiking through the desert, with the T-shirt.
Oh, absolutely.
You were just winging it.
Winging it. And
would you give anything not to go back and relive your 20s?
You know what's honest? Glow and I talk about this all the time. I loved my times in my life. I don't know that I would want to relive them though. I would not want to go back. You?
It just sounds so exhausting.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and especially if you're being thrown off the cliff face by a goat. That's one way to do your 20s. On that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his goat-loving pal. That doesn't sound good. I'm going to change that around. I'm his goat-fearing pal.
No, I'll give it to you. You are the goat. Greatest of all time.
Oh, zing, zang, zoom. I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive in Sheldon and co-director of the comics documentary Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So, Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. They're surprisingly large, though, is the thing. You don't think mountain goats are going to be as big as they are. They're pretty big.
I was thinking like a petting zoo goat. Like you could just go over and shoo it.
Yeah, they're not. They're big. The horns are very large, too. Very large when you see them. Yeah. And you're like, oh, you are not domesticated. You will absolutely throw me off.
You are not going to nibble corn kernels out of my hand.
Gang, we got a big show for you today because we are wrapping up the 2023 annum. And so we're going to go through our predictions for 2023 from the beginning of the year, if you remember in January. And so some stuff we got right. some stuff not so right. And we're gonna go through with a little bit of humble pie and a few bit of braggadocio moments there as well. But Brad, what was our first prediction for 2023, if you want to go through it?
Well, this one going all the way back to show number 263, if you want to look it up. We talked about talking about how Patreon, and we've been saying this throughout the year, Patreon is going to slowly entice people away from the founders level by unveiling new features, by unveiling new add-ons and offers and so forth, because people like Dave and I who came in at the founders level get a much better cut. We get a much better deal than people who came in afterwards. They kind of changed up the different tiers. You can't get into the founders tier unless you're already there. And once you leave, you can't go back. Right. So my logic, and I stick by this prediction, but we have to say it did not come true this year. Actually, I was very wrong this year, because my thought was that this year, 2023, they were going to unveil some very, very big changes for Patreon, and you'd have to get out of the founders level in order to access those changes. Well, I was right about half of that. They did unveil some very, very big changes, some very new features, some of which, as we talked about in an early show, were very good. Some of them were not so good. Yes. But they offered a metric ton of new features and so forth, new usability for Patreon. And you did not have to leave the founders level to access any of it.
Yeah, and I will say, though, that I still stand by the fact that I think that our prediction, long term, big picture, is going to continue, that they are going to entice everyone who is in that first generation of Patreon up the ladder, because I really feel like as a capitalist venture, they need to move us up the ladder. It behooves them to move us up the ladder. So even though I don't know that they did it this year, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 18 months, there's something really But however, saying all that, a lot of Patreons moving up the ladder seems to be video oriented right now.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And so I think maybe we're gonna fly under their radar, because a lot of Patreon is geared towards podcasts, and a lot of Patreon is geared towards video. And so I think a lot of the features that they're rolling out, because really, what else could they offer a cartoonist? It's like, a slightly larger JPEG, all right, well, great, hurrah. But if you're a video producer or if you're a podcaster, there's more that they could yet do to move us up. So I think that's still a possibility.
Oh, I'll tell you what's on my wish list for Patreon as far as comics artists and visual artists are concerned. I think, like I said earlier, I think collections was a step in the right direction, but we need more ability to catalog and present our work. And also, I'd like a better ability to present sequential work on Patreon, like a vertical scroll or a horizontal scroll. We've got that. We can do that. And I do panel by panel every time I upload sequential work, but it's not an attractive, especially now, it's not an attractive interface. It's not super intuitive. I'd like a better interaction there. There's lots of stuff they could do. I know what my wish list is, but I agree with you when you say that it's not on their list of priorities. Certainly not.
Yeah, and as much as I agree with you in terms of a vertical scroll versus this sort of weird clicky side scroller thing they've got going on that I don't love. But here's the thing, though, is that even if they introduced a really slick vertical scroll and said, but you got to move up a tier, I don't know that it'd be worth losing whatever 3%, 4% of my income for that. I don't know what they could offer me. It would have to be, it would have to be that and a whole lot more. Yeah. So I think, as much as I think that they are going to continue to do it, I still think that that we a little bit missed the mark on this one. So, and on that note, let me jump us into our next prediction for 2023. And I think this one, it was specific to me. So I will fall on the sword for this one, because I thought very hard that this would be the case. I thought that in 2023, TikTok would be banned in the United States. To be fair, to past me, there have been moves at the state house level in a couple of states to ban TikTok. And it did get removed, I think, from government phones.
Yes, that is correct.
And some universities have banned it off of official phones. Some companies have banned it off of officially issued phones. But it is not, I just want to say, I got it wrong. It did not get banned in the U.S.
No, although you do get partial credit because, like you pointed out, government phones cannot have TikTok on it,
right?
And certain other organizations, but no, it was not banned, not to the extent that you and I thought it was going to be. And it's still a very, very primary player on the social media landscape. And we're going to talk a little bit more about social media towards the end of the show because we had predictions there as well.
But I suppose, listen, my little precursor prediction for 2024 is watch it to be a little bit more of a platform for misinformation in the 2024 election, because it's already reared its head a couple times in 2023 where I was like, oh, interesting. That's clearly a state actor pushing that. But so TikTok's still viable in the US and still a barn burner in terms of numbers. Brad, then your next prediction for 2023, and again, partial points on this one, was about CSP.
Yeah, Clip Studio, I predicted that they were going to release a bunch of really big, significant updates and features. I'm going to take a W on that one. I think I pretty much got it. They have unveiled a new version. It's got a lot of new features. It's got some stuff that I like an awful lot. And also, I have to do a quick clarification from last week's show. Somebody pointed out in the Discord, remember I was telling you could link to objects, but they didn't, like if you put a sword in somebody's hand, they pointed out how I actually can do that. But that's kind of one of my little side gripes with Clip Studio. Finding documentation and tutorials on it is very, very difficult because it's at the heart, it's a Japanese product. And so a lot of times I find myself struggling with language barrier issues and so forth. But they did point out that there is a way to do it, and you just have to go through a couple hoops.
I think all of our European friends will chuckle at us because 99.9% of products in the world are geared towards having an English translation first for their instructions, we got to make sure the American market is okay. So the one time that we ever have a product, and I've had a few in my life that was like, hey, it's a Mexico first product or a Japanese first product. And you get so fussy, don't you, as an American? You're like, I just can't believe there's not the right documentation for this. Oh,
yeah. How dare they?
How dare they make this for the Japanese market beautifully first and then bring it to it? It's so fun. So I'm like every friend in any other language is like, all right, slow it down, you two,
Yeah. My note for our next prediction, my note here says Webtoons Publishing. I think that might have been one of yours. I don't have anything else written there, but I know us well enough. I think our prediction was something along the lines of Webtoons Publishing was going to become more of a forefront. They were going to start to gain traction, gain acceleration, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I don't know that that's hugely true yet. I will say that they have really leaned into the Lore Olympus books, all of which I think are New York Times bestsellers. But it doesn't seem yet. I guess what I'm saying is, as a consumer, I don't walk into a Barnes and Noble or a big bookstore and go, oh, look at this large lineup of Webtoons books yet. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I see like one or two and I go, oh, look at them. They're doing publishing. But I think again, partial points to me on this one. Yeah. I think they are publishing and they're clearly leaning into it. They're not going full bore yet, is what my guess is.
I'm gonna tell you, you were actually, I think, more right than you think that you were.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you why. Remember when I went to the Ringo Awards? Did anybody predict me winning an award? I don't think we did.
Oh, Brad, did we not predict that? Oh, God.
Was that not a
Brad, see, that's what's known as a black swan event, that you can't predict the fact that like even a guy with no talent can win an award. That's a black swan event.
Don't give it to anybody. Yeah. Hoisted on my own petard.
So you can have massive typos, like it was Brian Dwajwar and the typo came out Brad Guigar,
Yeah, well, they called me Brad Oh, I can't. I was trying to do the GIF thing, and I have no idea how to do
you
Guigar with
often
the
get
J.
Guigar. Isn't that the one you often get?
Yeah. Jiger.
Jiger? Oh,
would have to be.
Jiger. My goodness.
So anyway, when I remember I talked to you about doing the Ring Awards, and they gave me like 30 pounds of books. It's just the nicest package out of any of the awards ceremonies I've ever gone to. A lot of those were Webtoons books, and I was not familiar with them, but I wasn't also the target demographic for those books. So I'm going to say I bet if we actually did some show prep, if we went out and looked at the amount of Webtoons books that we can find in print on Amazon, I got a feeling there's more out there than you or I are tuned into because they're just not our demographic.
That's absolutely what's happened. Because honestly, if you've had a book launch, Brad, that gets a couple times in a row, New York Times bestseller, you're going to lean into it,
Yes.
Because their big money is in video games and TV sales, mainly in Korea. And so like books by comparison are not that expensive a development cost if you're a good sized company compared to, the food budget on a video game development. So, so I think you're probably right that we are not the target audience. We didn't really look into it. We don't see it as much as it exists. And I think that's probably true. So Brad, our next prediction for 2023, I think we can take the win on this one. And that was predicting, and maybe we were not alone on this one. I think maybe a good chunk of us predicted this, a big, solid, consistent fade for Twitter. And boy, howdy, has that proved to be true.
Yep. We were kind of, this one's a little bit of a judgment call. Because and Twitter fade is the right prediction. I think out of the two of us, I might have been a little bit more forceful in that I thought that Twitter was either going to go bankrupt by the end of the year or that Musk was going to have to sell it to someone else by the end of the year. I thought Twitter was going to be gone, right? But fade is definitely accurate. Twitter has definitely gone way down in terms of its significance to the American psyche. It's gone way down in terms of engagement. And you talk to anybody that's using Twitter in their publishing and their promotion, they'll tell you Twitter has gone way down in engagement, significance. It's delivering a lot less return on investment for the amount of time that we're putting into it. Twitter has really gone way down in its standing as one of the three major social media platforms. Remember, this was almost Twitter at one point had almost replaced the telephone system in the United States psyche in that presidents were doing almost all of their communication through Twitter, right? It was something that was very, very, you'd see, the prime minister of Britain tweeted today and it supplanted communications. And it's much, much less significant, much less a player. Twitter has absolutely through a jaw-dropping series of boneheaded, poorly thought out and downright fanciful decision-making on the part of Elon Musk. Some things that were pitched on a Monday and scrapped on a Tuesday. Clearly somebody who does not understand how to run a business, despite all of these myths that we've been told about him. He has absolutely driven Twitter into the ground.
Yeah, and is becoming more and more like Henry Ford every day. Not the good ways.
Yeah. Holy moly, no.
So here's what I find when I log into Twitter now. I find every time that I log in, not every time, but every second or third time that I log in, my user base has dropped. And what I'm finding in my reaction is I always go good. I'm happy about losing readers. Because I want it to die quicker, so I don't even have to deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an odd mental state to be in. Is that I just want it gone now. I want to not have to, because Brad and I always advise a pragmatic approach. But as the months go on and that doofus continues to make incredibly bad move after incredibly bad move, and sometimes becoming more vitriolically malevolent. You're like, I just want it gone now, and I want my readership to get off that platform so I can get off that platform. Unfortunately, I still have thousands of people there that I have to talk to, so I'm grinning and bearing it, but I hate it. I don't enjoy being on it, you know?
Oh, it is not great. It is not great. And it's getting less and less significant by the day. Although we do have to note, or at least I have to note, I was really prepared for Twitter to be gone by now. Like
I was too.
In a real sense.
I have to give credit that it's lasted longer. It turns out having a few billion in your pocket, you can keep a company afloat.
Well, and we do have credible news reports that indicate that the banks are kind of getting edgy. The banks that loaned him the money to make this sale and facilitated this, the banks are getting ready to start making their money back, and they're getting anxious. So we might, if we do a prediction show for 2024, I got a feeling we'll be revamping this one pretty easily, because it's definitely coming. But it did not come as quickly as we thought. Our next prediction, however, I think we can probably give ourselves a win on that one too. I think this was yours, Dave, and you said that DC Comics was just going to implode.
Yeah. And do you remember, was I referring to the film universe, or was I referring to the print universe?
I think you were talking print publishing.
Oh, okay. Well, because a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B on that prediction. But so for me, publishing wise, I mean, DC and Marvel in general, if you look at the book scan numbers, they're just going, it's like the Chutes and Ladders game. They're just going down, down, down. In terms of, I don't know, but I keep saying this. I don't know how much longer that Warner Brothers and Disney will keep floppies going. I'm amazed that they still exist. And
me too.
Well, how about you, Brad? What are your thoughts on that? Like, where would you? Are you surprised that they're still around at the end of 2023?
The same thing. I am very surprised they're still around. This might have been a prediction from 2021. I'm still surprised that there are comic shops still around. I'm still surprised that business model hasn't completely bottomed out at this point. You know, I'm very surprised they've been able to hold on and manage and to keep going year after year. I thought that was completely going to dissipate by now, and clearly I'm wrong about that too. I don't think that they're strong. I don't think that they're thriving, but they certainly haven't gone out of business.
And I think their margins are probably painfully thin. But it's funny because whenever I see a comic shop that still seems to be doing okay, I'm like, would that shop be doing okay if Magic the Gathering didn't exist and if Pokemon didn't exist? And like, it's not, what I'm saying is it's not comic books that are keeping them alive. It's a broader Funko Pop ecosystem that's keeping them alive, you know?
Yep. And they also, a lot of comic shops kind of pivoted a little bit into becoming coffee shops as well, or
which,
gathering
by the way, not
places.
A bad move, right?
No,
not a bad move.
Pretty smart. But they've combined the comic shop with other ideas, and of course, comic shops have been doing this other thing for quite a while. But they also started hosting events like a Magic the Gathering tournament or a place to do D&D, and they started putting sets out and to become a place where people could go and do community events, and that's also, I think, has been a pretty smart move on the part of comic shop owners.
Yeah. But partially why Brad and I, from 30,000 feet, like, you can argue book scan numbers and you can argue diamond numbers and you can argue the health of individual comic book shops. But from a certain point, I think Brad and I, this prediction is bound to come true at some point in the next couple of years, because at a certain point, you literally reach a breaking point where you do not have enough comic book shops in order to make it worthwhile to distribute floppies. And then also, you don't, Marvel and DC don't have the wherewithal to want to produce floppies anymore. And so then what do comic book shops sell? Like, you can see the writing on the wall for this entire thing falling apart
Yeah.
Because it was always a precarious business model in terms. You talk to any shop owner, and they're like, "Oh boy, it's like trying to squeeze a penny out of a dollar,"
Yeah.
in terms of making a margin on that shop. And so,
and if you find, by the way, business owners, if you find yourself in that situation, just keep the dollar. just keep the dollar. If you find yourself trying to squeeze a penny out of a dollar, just keep the dollar. Put it in the till.
I have to say, I've really enjoyed coming to Brad's TED Talk today, and I want to say this has been a wonderful monetary policy talk from Brad Geiger. So Brad,
trying to squeeze a penny out of a dollar. That's your idiom.
I thought that was self-explanatory in that they have costs that are 99 cents, and so all they have left is a penny of profit. It's a tough business. The margins are really tough, is what I'm saying.
I'm needling you, but yes, you're absolutely right. It's a tough business. Between
product getting destroyed, between theft, between the actual margins of profit on the product that you do sell, between the weird sort of calendar-based sales, like a certain floppy, there's like this weird interregnum period where it has no value at all. But if you hold on to it for 10 years, then it has value again. But you've got to keep it safe and in plastic for those 10 years. It's a weird business model, and it's hard to maintain a profit with it,
Yeah. No, I agree. So let's do another prediction. I think this one has my stink all over it. Yeah. No one will be using Mastodon. I'm going to take a right with an asterisk on that. I have raised my endorsement, I guess, or my non-endorsement of Mastodon. I've appreciated it a little bit more in terms of what it delivers. In terms of the new social media platforms, I still think it's the lowest of the three in terms of the engagement. I still think that Blue Sky and Threads edge it out pretty easily. So I really am not confident on seeing it step up and become a major player. So in terms of no one using Mastodon, not exactly right, but in terms of saying that it's definitely out of all of the options, not the strongest. I'm going to say that I kind of stand by that.
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, listen, there's also a whole host of also-rans, of post.news and this and that. And there's a bunch of other ones that no one's... What's that?
Yeah. Co-host is another one.
So there's a bunch of also-rans that are also no one is using. But yeah, I will co-sign that Mastodon is not it. I will say this, though, Brad, and this is a good way to sort of end the break. I'm surprised at the end of 2023 that we are still in as fractured a social media market as we're in.
Yeah.
In the sense that no one seems to be winning, ? Like, I don't know that it's Threads. I don't know that it's Blue Sky. I don't know that it's whatever Twitter is going to become. I don't know where people are going to hang their hat in 2024.
No, and that's something that might be worth talking about a little bit more, where we can really get into the topic. But yeah, it's really amazing that at this point in time, it's been basically Elon took over Twitter at the beginning of this year. It's been an entire year, and there has been no front runner. And I stick by my analysis of that, in that I think what that means is that we as a group of people, as a culture, are over social media, because we've had lots of chances for somebody to take over. It isn't the fact that none of them are good. The fact is we want something else now, and we're still waiting to see what it is. We'll know it when we see it. We just don't know what it is at this point.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, Let's talk comics.
So, Brad, for those of you that were wondering, oh no, I've missed Drunk Comic Lab. It was the 2 funniest episodes that were ever recorded of Comic Lab. What can I do? Oh, woe is me. Here's the good news, gang. You can still join us over at patreon.com/Comic Lab. You will get those 2 episodes and 300 other episodes that you've never heard before called ProTips that we record every week for backers. Do jump in over at patreon.com/Comic Lab and get those episodes. And Brad, what was our next prediction for 2023, my friend?
All right. I think this one feels like it was one of yours, and I think I'm gonna argue that we got this one right, even though as we're gonna talk about shortly, it's gonna be hard to prove this one. ChatGPT will be used for brainstorming and co-writing scripts, and specifically we're talking about comic scripts using AI writing. I think you're right about that, but I think it's such a toxic discussion that anyone who's actually doing this is not talking about it. They're not outing themselves as people who are using ChatGPT to do any brainstorming or writing. And I'll throw in their illustrations and stuff, using them to maybe brainstorm a background for an illustration or something like that, they can then, ideate off of. I think a lot of people are doing it, but it's a dirty little secret. And because they know, especially in the art community, that it's toxic. And so they're doing it secretly with the doors locked and the shades pulled. But we're not going to actually know that they're doing it until a lot of things change, which may take many years.
Well, yeah, and I think a couple things in 2023 prove this point. One was the actor and the writer strike in Hollywood.
Yeah.
For those of us that were watching it closely, it was interesting to see the situations in which AI was used and was disclosed because people were angry about it in the course of the strike, saying, oh, yeah, you claim like you're not going to use AI to use scripts. Well, what about this episode of this show that absolutely used AI? And people were like, oh, wait, what? I didn't know that. And so what I'm saying is in the course of the strike, things came out both from actors and from writers who were mad at the studios. So even on the big corporate level, it's already started to be used. And I will admit, just for my own self, I tried it. I did, both for image generation. I haven't tried it for scripts, though, because I don't know. I didn't try it. But anyway, but I'm willing to admit that you'd have to be a little bit incurious to not want to see what it could do or see what it could do in your comic world. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, oh, I'd like to see what it's capable of. There are sort of, like the word Luddite has come to mean someone who's anti-technology. But remember, like the Luddites, one of the reasons why they were Luddites was they were mad, not that technology existed, but that it was taking jobs and that it was ruining livelihoods, right? And so I think some of the artists that get mad about AI are like, they're mad about the prospect that their career, their path could be blocked or ruined or shortened because of AI's existence. And I get that. That's a valid fear. But when used as a tool, I don't know that it's as dangerous, mainly because when used as a tool, you see that it sort of produces things at a 3rd grade level for the most part.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that nervous about it the more I use it. I know people are producing these massive works of art that are winning art contests, but I feel like that it requires such an input of work on their behalf that it's akin to learning painting. Like, you might as well just learn painting at that point,
Well, and it's also a single standalone image, whereas comics, to transpose and translate that over the comics, I'm still, just like you, I don't think we have anything immediately to worry about. Although I do think that at some point it's going to, technology rarely gets worse. It always gets better. So I think it's coming for us, but I don't think that I'm nowhere near as frightened as I was at the beginning of the year. And I'll just let that lead into one of my predictions on this. And I happily got this wrong. I said that we're going to see the first AI comic that would feature AI writing and AI art. And it was going to be the first AI webcomic. And I said, dishearteningly, it was going to be good. Right. And if that's happened, it's been under my radar. I don't think we've seen that happen. And I don't mean, and this is where comic syntax lets us down a little bit So I don't mean a single comic. I mean a series of comics. Somebody who's putting out work on a regular basis and building an audience that way. I'm sure you can point me to a single comic that was done this way that it could be arguably good. But what I'm talking about is a comic series, right? That somebody is building an audience. And they're doing it strictly through AI art and writing. And I don't think we've achieved that yet. I don't think that is anywhere out there that's happening. And if it is, it's way under my radar.
Yeah, and the times that I've seen it done, and for some reason I've seen it mostly done on Reddit, probably for the type of people that use Reddit. But anyway, where they've clearly tried to produce a short story using AI. And what ends up happening is, and I'm just going to use this for illustrative purposes, let's say it's a bright green frog in space in a space adventure, right?
Yeah.
And so they're clearly using the prompt bright green frog 1950s bubble astronaut helmet, right? And it goes panel to panel. And the only reason I use that image is so you have it clearly in your head. It goes panel to panel, bright green frog with a 1950s space bubble helmet, astronaut helmet on his head. What's interesting is an AI cannot do this yet, seemingly, is produce a consistently drawn frog with a consistently drawn helmet. So yes, you get a bright green frog, and your mind is making a connection between the sequentiality of the two panels, that it is supposed to be the same bright green frog, but they're drawn in such wildly divergent styles. Like one feels like it's a pastel painting, and the next one feels like line art, and then the next one feels like a completely different style of line art, and you're like, oh, clearly they're putting in the same prompt, but getting very different results. That's what I've seen so far from AI-produced webcomics.
Yeah. And again, I think it's going to get better. But in terms of 2023, I think we were a little bit secure in our place in comics for now.
Yeah.
And here's another one, by the way, I think we were wrong about, although I'm less excited about being wrong about this one. We had predicted that copyright law was going to catch up to AI art.
Right.
And we were looking towards a couple of, headline lawsuits that were being brought against AI, and not only from artists like our friend Sarah Anderson, but also from places like Getty Images and other companies that had been infringed upon by AI. And what we're seeing, my understanding is we're seeing that the judges either don't really quite understand how this applies, or they're taking a very, very hardline edge on how they're going to apply copyright law. And so far, I got to say, it does not look good from a copyright angle to fight this. And I think we were optimistic in saying that we thought copyright law was going to catch up with AI art, but I don't think it happened in 2023.
Yeah, the two bits of progress that I've seen, one positive, one negative. One was, I think it was issued by the U.S. Copyright Office, or maybe a version of the USPTO or a subsegment of the USPTO, was the idea that in order for something to claim copyright, a human had to be the final author of it. And so, for example, like a studio could not have AI write the next Marvel movie and then claim copyright because it was AI that had written it. I see that as a positive because, frankly, if you have a human, an artist, taking a pass at it in order to claim copyright, well, at least it's one job saved, you know? So I'm at least pro that. I do see, and my spidey sense was this was the case anyway. Early versions of court decisions seem to indicate that it's fair use for AI companies to scrape and then use as a resource our art. And my spidey sense was going into 2023, if you remember the conversation, that actually was fair use. And a lot of people got mad at me for that. But I kind of do think it's fair use in the sense that it's transformative. It's iterative. It's not repetition. For the most part, it's not repetitious of the original product. So we'll see how that goes, because the early indications seem to be the judges think that it's fair use too, but we'll see, because it's still working through case law. And remember, it's going to take 2 or 3 years for case law to get established on this, because the courts ain't quick. The courts ain't quick, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, they grind real slow.
Yeah.
So here's another one. This one I think was mine, and I know I was wrong about it because what I said was blockchain was coming back. If you remember, blockchain was something that was a really big issue coming into the end of 2022 and 23, or the beginning of 23. And it was, speaking of toxic brands, everybody hated blockchain. If a company announced that they were going to implement blockchain, immediately people from the artistic community said, we don't want any part of that. You're dead to us. We're leaving. And we saw it happen over and over again, where people would say that they were going to use this software, and people just it jumped ship like crazy. And my prediction, and I don't know how I feel about this anymore. I don't know whether I would double down for next year on this, but my prediction was that blockchain was going to come back, and it was going to, but they were going to give it a new name. They were going to give it new branding. They were basically going to try to separate themselves from blockchain. This isn't blockchain. Instead, it wasn't going to be the new and improved blockchain.
Right.
You just weren't going to hear the word blockchain at all. But at the heart of it, the tech people were in my imagination, were going to tell us, hey, this is still blockchain. They're just calling it something else. They're giving it a new coat of paint. That was my prediction for 2023. And I've got to be honest, I don't think that happened. In fact, I'm pretty sure it didn't happen.
It did not happen. What's funny is blockchain, and to a large extent crypto. I remain so happy that my early prediction from 2022, 2023, that crypto was all going to fall apart. Boy, people called me to task on that. And I was like, I'm telling you, I had journalist friends and friends of mine that actually worked in crypto in San Francisco. And they're like, why are you so anti-crypto? And I'm like, I'm telling you, it's being used to launder money. I'm telling you, it's being used for fraud. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's greater fool theory in terms of investing, in terms that there's always a bigger fool that will invest than you. And so that's how you make your money, is on the greater fool. And they're like, you don't understand. Crypto's changing the way. It's a non-federal system of, and I was like, I don't see it. I was like, this is Dutch tulip mania all over again. Remember the 17th century when the Dutch went nuts investing in tulip flowers and then it all crashed? I was like, this is the Dutch tulip mania all over again. And I'm so happy to be proven right about that, because I had journalist friends who were like, this is not being used for laundering money. I'm like, I'm telling you, large organizations that are not necessarily benevolent are using this to launder money through systems. And anyway, long story short, I'm so happy to be proven right that crypto was largely being used by a few key malevolent actors to get a greater fool over a bunch of idiots that were investing in it.
Oh, absolutely. For me, it was economics 101. It was that econ that I learned at the 101 level in college: supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right. And scarcity. If you had a JPEG that could be copied infinitely.
Oh, you're talking about NFTs now. Yeah.
Yeah. But that was at the heart of blockchain technology, was at the heart of that. If you had that, and all you were really paying for was the receipt that you bought that JPEG, and you didn't have any ownership of it. You couldn't control who used it any place. All you were buying was a receipt, which is a weird purchase.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy a receipt, not an object. Or not a commodity of any sort. It did not respond to Econ 101, and that's when I knew it was all full of shnikes. And by the way, that you can see now, NFTs, big topic in 2021. You don't hear anybody talking about NFTs today. You don't even hear them.
Asinine. It was asinine.
Yes. It's completely gone. It's dissipated.
Yeah. And by the way, the lesson to take away from that for all of us in our art is stay the course. What we do is we produce comics and share them freely with the world, sell books, sell patronage, sell Kickstarter products. It's this whole desire to make a buck off of NFTs was like people were trying to jump through a hoop that I don't know. The whole thing was a weird moment there in comics for a hot second there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm glad it's gone.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our last prediction. We had a total of 12 predictions. It was our biggest prediction show ever. And that prediction was that original art, and I think this came off of the blockchain and the NFT conversation. The prediction was that original art was going to become more valuable in general. Original art was going to become more valuable.
Yeah. I think this was mainly for me, and I will claim a loss on this prediction in this sense. I don't know that this year made a demonstrable difference in the cost or value or worth of original art. I think I was probably right in the 5 to 20 year trend that as more and more folks draw digitally, as more and more folks or fewer and fewer folks create original physical art, that it would have a greater value. Yeah, I think broadly speaking, that's true, but there was no jump in 2023 in original art price. So I think I should claim the loss on that one in that prediction.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I although I would have liked to see that one come true, I don't think we nailed that one. And I just did a quick tally here as we were doing the show. Out of a dozen predictions, would you like to guess how many we got right?
I got to say, it wasn't a strong year of predictions. I'm going to guess 3 we got right.
Actually, we did better than you thought. Using our own, judging ourselves on our own rightness and wrongness. 6 right, 6 wrong. We were right at 50%.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
So, okay, but taking away, separate from our predictions, Brad, the core advice that we tend to give on this show, did any of that change in 2023?
No, the core stuff still holds true. And it's really amazing because this is something that at some point when we get a chance, we should talk about it more. But it's really amazing. Even our own listeners, every now and again, somebody will come into the Discord server and they'll talk about, getting something ready for a publisher or, that their career path is on this direction. Right. And we're not talking about people who are doing children's books and stuff like that. We've already discussed it. That's kind of a unique situation. But even our own listeners sometimes don't understand that what we've been saying has been consistent since 2018 when we started this show. Do it yourself. Don't trust a publisher. Don't sign a contract that you haven't vetted thoroughly through a legal professional, and you really think about the effect that's going to have on your career long term. Own and control your own work. Self-publish. You're going to have much, much bigger margins. And at the end of the day, none of that makes any sense. None of that means anything until you're doing a good comic. And you got to figure out what that means for you, how it is that you bring the quality. But those like little key concepts, quality, owning and control, quality and independence. Yeah. And understanding your business. Those have been the things that we've been saying week after week after week on this show since we started it in 2018.
Yeah, that it all starts with making a good comic, focusing on that for years on end, and then from there building outward and building out, like Brad said, in an independent way, because that's where the money makes sense. The money in comics makes sense for you on an artist for not only the years to come, but for the decades to come when you own and control your own comic titles and you make your own magic. No one will ever care about your comic as much as you do. So own it, control it, and make that happen for you,
Absolutely. Now, we started talking about this a little bit earlier, and I wanted to circle around back to it. You hear what we thought was going to happen in 2023. Let's take a couple seconds to talk about the things that totally surprised us in 2023, the things that we did not expect.
Much like this entire topic is surprising me now, yes.
Yeah. Well, it shouldn't. We discussed it before the show.
I think you're putting a lot of stock into my memory, Brad. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one is that, and we touched on it a little bit, we were very surprised coming into 2023 that there has been no replacement for Twitter. That none of these, not Blue Sky, not Threads. I think neither one of us thought it was going to be Mastodon. I kind of thought, I can go back and listen to the show. I thought it was going to be Threads. I was convinced it was going to be
too.
Threads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially after that launch. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really did. I'll be honest. This was again, in fairness to Brad, we did talk about this before the show. This whole segment, and I had just forgotten. So I'm remembering now. Basically, yeah, we're talking about the Black Swan events. Like, yes, Brad Geiger can win an award. So these are all things that are popping up. That
anything is possible.
But yeah, I did not. I thought that Threads was based on that launch. I really thought, well, this is it. And I bet you that Threads was popping champagne and thinking that they were it in those first weeks.
First week.
I think in a way that's surprising me, society writ large is basically saying we're waiting for the next thing and no one yet knows what the next thing is. It's a weird interregnum between the death of Twitter and the next thing, or the slow fade from millennials with Facebook and what is the next thing. I don't know what the next thing is. This is me being honest. Yeah. It's probably TikTok, if I'm being honest, is the next thing. Mm-hmm. That seems to be where the youngins are going. And it doesn't, TikTok, as we've talked before, doesn't necessarily benefit us as web cartoonists.
Absolutely. Here's another thing we didn't see coming. Hall H at Comic-Con. Not only did we not see that coming, the fact that the writer's strike and the actor's strike was going to basically shut down Hall H at Comic-Con, but we did not predict, in fact, I predicted the exact opposite. We didn't predict the amazing positive effect that was going to have on artists, as particularly independent artists, working the floor at San Diego Comic-Con. It was a huge banner year for artists selling their stuff, mainly because Hall H had been shut down.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about it on a show prior that it turned out to be one of my better shows ever at San Diego Comic-Con. But aside from the financials, it was also just lovely how much of the focus was on comics, Brad.
Yeah.
And how wonderful that was as comics creators that we were able to be there for it and to experience that. Where 100,000 people were basically like, Hollywood's not here. I guess I'll focus on comics was basically the attitude, don't you think?
Oh, very much so. You could tell. And again, like I was there for the first time in 10 years this past year.
Which, by the way, what a Black Swan event that was, too.
Yes. It was very well. And I got a feeling I'm probably, ramping up to go back next year. That's a pretty safe prediction, too.
Everybody, I'm excited.
If we do a live show, are you kidding me? Chance to go back to the San Diego condo and have some of that peanut butter whiskey? It's all on my list. It's all on my list. So yeah, I walked around that show floor looking for reasons that I could insist that I was right, that losing Hall H was not going to be a positive thing for people exhibiting on the show floor. And I had lots of time to walk around and try to find evidence, and I couldn't. There was everybody was having a great week. One smile was bigger than the one before. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But we did not see that coming. And even when we saw it coming, we were wrong, or at least I was wrong, about what it was going to mean. It was completely blind. We were blindsided by it. And here's the last one that is on my list here. Patreon trying to switch to social media. We did not see that coming. Patreon going from a very successful subscription, not moderator, but it supports people running subscription software. Is what basically Patreon is. Right. It supports you having a subscription. And we did not see that they were going to try to do this really big pivot to social media. And so far, I'm telling you, since I experimented with Patreon chat that first week, I've never posted again. I posted a couple times, but did not get. In fact, most of the response I got was a negative response. Like, why is this showing up? What is this? I don't like it. I don't want it. Seeing Patreon try to pivot to social media is something neither one of us saw and neither one of us particularly wants.
Yeah. And I don't know yet whether Patreon will execute on it better. As of right now, I'm not a fan of the free model follower model, but we'll see if they execute it better with ideally with a secondary stream that's basically just a social media stream. I'd be here for that. But as of right now, the first pass, I'm really almost angrily reacting to the free follower model. And I will say, Brad, one other one that we didn't talk about in terms of things that we didn't see coming was, because this has a knock-on effect to the broader comics ecosystem, is we all saw the writing on the wall with the DC cinematic universe falling apart in the last couple of years, that they're basically going to have to relaunch completely. But I'm somewhat unpleasantly surprised by how spectacularly the Marvel universe seems to be falling apart as well. And I think we should all anticipate that aside from Deadpool, it's going to take them 2 to 4 years to sort of reset with Fantastic Four and X-Men and stuff like that. Because even though Brad and I never used or benefited from the sort of trickle-down economics of the cinema doing well, we had friends at Marvel and some at DC that were getting work based on, hey, we need to do a quick movie tie-in release for this book, or hey, we need to do some ancillary artwork for this. There was trickle-down work that was happening in comics from the cinematic stuff. And even though Brad and I never benefited from it is a hit to an already not amazing print industry for Marvel and DC if the cinematic universe doesn't generate trickle-down work, you know?
Yeah. Well, here's a real quick question, and maybe we can get into this a little bit more. A lot of people talk about superhero burnout, that we had so much superhero content everywhere we looked for years and years and years. Kind of the same way we had cowboy movies and Westerns at one point in American history. And then it just became, we were over it and we went on to other things. Right. Do you think superhero burnout is a thing? And do you think that that's going to actually have ripple effects throughout other comics? For example, anyone else who does a comic about supervillains in a corporate setting, do you think that there is going to be a wider effect of superhero burnout? Dave Kellett, I ask you.
Maybe, yes. I think that we, after 33 films for Marvel, or 32, I don't know how many it was. Yeah. It's telling to me that the superhero quote unquote stuff that's doing well is all the anti-hero stuff. The Boys is doing gangbusters. Deadpool 3 is going to do fine. Venom did fine. Like, people are done with the hero's journey and want the anti-hero's journey after 33 Marvel films. So, Brad, you might be fine because you, in part, tell a lot of anti-hero journeys with Evil Link. So, you know what I mean by that? Like, it's not all good guys doing the good arc. It's also the bad people doing the good arc sometimes, or the bad people doing the bad. So also, I think you're just a way more inventive storyteller than that anyway. So you're fine is what I'm getting at. But what's your take on it? Do you think that the superhero genre is on pause or dying or dead, or where do you think it is?
I don't know. It's a fascinating debate because it gets people very wound up. I noticed, but I think it's a thing. I think superhero burnout is a thing. I think those of us who do superhero stuff are akin to people in the early 60s who were doing old Western type stuff. And I think we have to keep an eye on that or risk becoming what's the word? Anorectic and
I'm not helping you. No, you're fighting this one. You're fighting this one on your own.
Oh, there it is. Anachronistic. We become an anachronism.
Elmer Fudd. Jeez Louise.
We become out of step. God damn it. So it's a good topic for maybe a later show, but I do think those of us doing superhero comics face becoming an anachronism.
I mean, to be fair, Marvel trying to make me give a shit about, I don't know, Moon Knight or Echo or Photon or these characters that are like
Madam Web.
Yeah, Madame Web. Yeah. 4th tier, 5th tier characters, right? Like, that's a stretch anyway, but I have to give them credit. And Feige made me care about Guardians of the Galaxy, which when I was a comic book reader, and I did buy physical copies of Guardians of the Galaxy when I was 13, 14, 15, it was a terrible comic. Let's just be honest about that. It was terrible. I'm not kidding.
Nobody was a Guardians of the Galaxy fan in the 80s. No.
Brad, I actively made fun of Ant-Man. I actively made fun of Captain America. Those were dopey-ass comics when we were coming up, right?
Yeah.
No one was really an Ant-Man fan. And so the fact that they made us care at all, full points to them, full marks for making that happen, because they weren't great comics. Let's be honest about it, you know? The fact that Iron Man was the lead of that whole universe, Iron Man was kind of second tier, third tier, if we're honest about it.
Third tier at that point. Nobody was an Iron Man fan except for a chosen few. No, and it just goes to show you that sometimes some really great stuff can come from very humble beginnings.
Right.
Just like in 2018 when a couple of web cartoonists decided they were going to do a podcast. We're still waiting for good things to come from that one, but it's good to know that one of these days it might happen. Until then, you're going to hear us remind you at the end of every show that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Guigar, who in turn is waiting for his own Scott Lang moment, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
I've got no problems with shrinking. I need help the other way. My friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And much like when Scott Lang grows and becomes Giant Man, Brad also gets tired real quick and has to lie down on the couch for a while. So the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission. Sorry, that was a pretty good joke. It's used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. But until then, thank you so much for giving us those 5-star reviews. It's really helping keep us at the top on Spotify, where we are finding a whole lot of new people who are very happy they found this show.
And listen, if you can't join us on Patreon, first of all, we get it. We're artists. We completely get it. It takes 2 seconds to go over to Apple Podcasts or to Spotify and do a quick 5-star review. It means the world to the algorithm in terms of helping folks find the podcast, and we thank you so much for that. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/Comic Lab. So I will go ahead and say that like Brad on the couch. Patreon.com/Comic Lab.
Oh, God, the lip smacking, too. Boy, I'll tell you. You know, Dave, there's one thing we missed in our predictions.
What's that?
We missed Phil Folio winning the NCS award, because I'm telling you, everybody could have predicted that one.
We should have predicted that.
We should have seen that one coming.
Up against Phil Folio. Yep. Well, guess who's going home with no trophy? Brad and I. We could have predicted that.
We didn't need a crystal ball for that one.
Well, here's what's funny, Brad. Who are the two chumps that traveled to the NCS? I'll tell you who. The two wide-eyed idiots that thought they stood a chance.
You're right. We didn't show up because we thought there was no chance. Well, we still showed right up, didn't we?
I tell you what, not only showed up, these two idiots rented a tux. They rented a tux, God. Brad. 2023, I'm out $95, Brad.
95? Mine was 200 and change. Of course, mine wasn't powdered blue and had ruffles.
Well, see, mine was crotchless, so I don't know, maybe that was savings.
I wondered what that was.